What's up guys, Nick here with Ghost Bros Gaming. Today we're going to be looking at some Tearlaments tech options for post BANLIST, since that's coming up in the near future. We're going to look at like what cards are going to be played, what aren't going to be played, and you can look at this as like a market watch. You should be picking up these cards because they're probably going to go up in value, especially like the first 3 or 4 that we're going to talk about. So with that being said, make sure you like, subscribe the video. I've got my coffee here. And let's get into it.
Ghost Bros Gaming.
Alright, so first off, what we're going to look at are the potential hits. I'm not going to go through each of these individually because you've all played against Tearlaments enough to know what they do at this point, but we're expecting to see, say, like a Kit Kalos ban, a limit of Perla Rhino, and then some combination of limits to the main deck Tearlaments, probably Havness to 1 or 2, and I'd say Screen to 1 or 2 as well. And then for the Ishizu stuff, Keldo is the most likely to get hit, but I could also see one of the Millers getting hit as well. I think Agito got hit in the OCG, but I don't really see a reason for that as much. I think that Kelbeck might be the better choice. So without further ado, let's get into it. First up, our first solution, and the one that we've seen the most consistently from the OCG, is King of the Swamp. So this card is super good. The reason being is that, you know, obviously it can substitute itself for any fusion material that's specifically listed on a card, but it's also an aqua, so you can, if you still have Kit Kalos, you can use this to go into Kit Kalos. If you wanted to just use this as part of the fusion for one of your Tearlaments, you could. It just works perfectly with the deck. It also can be discarded to search polymerization, which means you also get another fusion on your turn, because if you activate polymerization, not only are you going to get the fusion from polymerization, but you're also going to trigger the Tearlaments that you're sending to the grave with polymerization. So instead of 3 fusion triggers, you now have 4 fusion triggers that turn, which can be impactful with things like Bestials and Ishizu messing with your fusions. It also opens up other fusion lines and fusion cards. So Grapha is the one we see the most commonly played, the new one from the structure deck, because it's a negation that allows you to discard as part of the effect, i.e. trigger another Tearlament. Invoked Caliga is also another potential option. If you special summon this during your opponent's turn, they only get 1 more monster effect, which is really tough to get rid of if they're going first, because they can't go into battle to attack over it, and they would need another monster effect to get out Kaleido Heart to get rid of this card. So it can be a good stun option. And then Millenniumizer Strict is another generic fusion target, but I don't think we see that many people playing it. The only cons to this card is, say, like extra deck space, and it's not like there's no effect when there's milled, but this is the one that sees the most consistent play in the OCG, and I would be grabbing these super rares if I were you. The next card on our list is going to be Foolish Burial Goods. So Foolish Burial Goods is seeing a lot of play anyway these days, but specifically in the OCG, once the consistency of the deck gets hit, Foolish Burial Goods is a search, right? You can send Sulliek to search a Tearlament monster, or you could send Scream to add the trap. The only downside to this is that there's no effect when it's milled. So I would definitely be grabbing the secret rares of these, because it's one of those cards that, depending on how hard they get hit, this would be the next up to add consistency to the deck after King of the Swamp, in my opinion. But in a lot of cases, you're probably going to see this played along with one of Foolish Burial. Foolish Burial is, I mean, we know why Foolish Burial is good. You can just send an Ishizu card to get a free 5 mil. You could send a Tearlament to kickstart your fusion plays, although you would need one in your hand to fusion. But the problem with it is that there's no effect when milled, and that's something that Tearlaments decks really seem to go for, is effects when milled. Alright, so next up is Cyberstein, which is a card I've been seeing on some YouTube videos as a tech option in Tearlament. You can bring this back with Sprite Elf, pay 5,000 life points, which is quite steep, but you get to special summon any fusion monster from your extra deck, which means it's kind of like an instant fusion. I think you're primarily going to be going for Kit Kalos, assuming that your plays had been interrupted that turn, and you can get Kit Kalos' effect, or you could get Rulkalos, Kaleido, any of the other fusions. It could facilitate a rank 4 play by bringing Mud Dragon out, and then also you get the ability to play a couple extra cards in your extra deck for this specific purpose. I think Naturia Exterio is probably the most common that we'll see played, but a couple other options that you have, or I guess more than a couple, are the Last Warrior from Another Planet, which says destroy all monsters on the field. Neither player can summon monsters, but if that gets outed, you're in a world of hurt. Invoked Makaba, Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, and even the Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, which seems like a really good card. Just note that if you destroy it, you can't special summon it back from the grave because it wasn't properly fusion summoned in the first place. So another engine that we've seen being played a lot, which I think is actually really good, is the Shaddoll engine. And that could be just a beast, a Hell Shaddoll, Hollow, or a Hedgehog. It could just be those in the main deck so that you can make Winda. But something that we're also seeing is side decking 3 Shaddoll Fusion. The reason that Shaddoll Fusion is being side decked is because if you're going second and they control an extra deck monster, which unless you're playing like Floenderies, you're probably going to be controlling. They're probably going to be controlling an extra deck monster. You can activate Shaddoll Fusion to send an Ishizu and a Shaddoll monster from your deck to your graveyard to make Shekin Naga, and then the Shaddoll monster that you sent is probably going to be Hedgehog, so that you can add a Shaddoll card from your deck to your hand, which makes Shek's effect live, i.e. it's an Omni Negate that you can discard a Shaddoll monster to trigger. So this is something that we're probably going to be seeing a lot more play. I would pick up this engine. It honestly depends on how hard they get hit, but the Winda play is something we see a lot in the OCG. So I would be looking at this as a good option for your Tearlament post ban list. All right, so next up we have Diviner of the Herald. So Diviner saw a lot of play in early Tearlament builds anyway, as a way to make Baronne as another negation for your turn 1 plays. But if we see a lot of the Ishizu names get hit and the Tearlament names get hit, this card can help a lot with consistency and then just the in state of the board, right? Having Baronne is nothing to scoff at. That is such a good play. So it's very versatile as well. It can send an Ishizu card if you normal summon it, or it can send, you can get a mill or a shuffle. You can make Baronne or just generic synchro plays. You can modulate its level to be a level 4 or a level 6, or rank 4 or 6 plays, making Beatrice. You can bring it back with Sprite Elf, so it's not technically a dead mill. It is compatible with Herald of Orange Light, right? Because it kind of sucks to draw that Herald and not have anything else, so it's really nice to have the additional fairy names. If you wanted to run Intis, you could send Intis since it's a fairy from your graveyard, and Intis isn't a bad super poly target, so not terrible to have in the extra deck. And overall, it's just a small engine. You only want to run like 1 or maybe 2 or 3 of these, depending on how bad the hits are and how much consistency is needed in the deck. But it's really probably only going to be played at 1 and offers so much versatility to the in board. The other tech options that we might look at would be the dangers. So specifically Nessie is the better option here. You would probably play a smaller engine of dangers, to be honest, but the problems with the dangers is that they're pretty random, right? Like, you don't get to choose what you discard. Now the plus side is that hopefully you're playing a lot of cards that get their effects if they're discarded, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem, but it does kind of leave your plays up to random, and you have to build a board without really knowing what you're going for. These I don't think I've seen being played, but I saw it being talked about in a TCG Player article. Armageddon Knight and Dark Grepher, both at 1, both searchable by Rhoda, but I just don't know if they do enough for the deck. So if you draw this but no other Tearlament name, it's dead. So even if you were to send one of the Tearlaments to fuse, you would need another Tearlament in your hand to be able to do that. And specifically with Dark Grepher, you have to send 1 Dark from your hand to send one from the deck to the graveyard. So I don't know, these feel a little bad, especially when they don't even have a mill effect. I would much rather be playing, say, King of the Swamp, Foolish Burial Goods, Shadow Engine, and Diviner before I even look at these plays. I just don't think that they're all that great, but these are potential options, and it's searchable by Roto, which you're probably going to be playing in this deck once consistency gets hit. All right, so looking at our solutions here, our best one is going to be King of the Swamp. It's the most played in the OCG, followed by Foolish Burial Goods, and then I would say Foolish Burial or even Diviner. Diviner is just a very versatile card. Next up would be Shadow packages, whether that's just 2 Shadows in the main deck to make Winda, or the full siding of Shadow Fusion to make Shek and send cards from your main deck to the graveyard. It's a really good play. Cyberstein is also just an amazing card right now with Tearlaments, because it can just cheat out, it can instant fusion any of the Tearlament names, and then could be better. Nessie is just too random to kind of rely on, but that might be the go-to depending on how many hits they take. And then Dark Grepher and Armageddon Knight, mentioned in a TCG Player article, I think they're bad. I wouldn't play them. Alright guys, so that is it for Tearlaments post ban list options. If you disagree with any of these or feel like we missed something, please just leave a comment down below. We'd love to take a look at it. Otherwise, please remember to like and subscribe. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time on Ghost Bros Gaming.